phony payroll sheets, and fake IDs. Tonight at 10, Julie Kraft begins an exclusive investigation into this rising form of crime. It's a case of forgery and deception, cashing in. Tonight at 10, only on Channel 5 News.
You're watching Channel 5.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. It has been 7 weeks now since the whole presidential primary process began in New Hampshire. It only seems like 7 years. And now we come to the day which may determine who the Democratic candidate for president will ultimately be. Today we'll hear from voters in Kansas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and most importantly, New York. A series of victories today could put the nomination well within Bill Clinton's grasp. A serious loss may well push his party to search in earnest for somebody else. The polls are still open, but as always, we've been talking to people after they have voted, and as always, ABC's Lynn Scherr has been analyzing what they have to say. Lynn?
Well, Peter, it may be 7 weeks into this campaign, but the Democratic voters are still not enamored of any of their candidates. Each one continues to carry enough negative baggage to make easy victory elusive. Let's start with Bill Clinton. When we asked New York Democrats whether they thought the Arkansas governor had the honesty and integrity to be president, 50% said yes, but a sizable 46% said no. As for Jerry Brown, we asked whether voters here considered him level-headed and practical enough to be president. 39% said yes, but a substantial 58% said no. Mr. Brown himself has acknowledged his nickname as Governor Moonbeam. Now consider Paul Tsongas. While he didn't campaign actively in New York, he got votes anyway. But what kind of votes? Well, according to preliminary results from our exit polls, 51% of his support was negative. It came from those who said they disliked the other candidates. So who did like these men? For Clinton, one answer is Jewish voters. He is getting 50% of the Jewish vote in New York, compared to 35% for Tsongas, 11% for Jerry Brown. Black voters are so far splitting their support between Clinton and Brown, who made a major pitch for their votes by saying he'd like Jesse Jackson as his running mate. But Governor Brown didn't gain much ground with his flat tax proposal. When asked how they thought it compared with the current tax system, only 20% said they thought it would be more fair, while 48% said it would be less fair. Finally, this evidence of New York Democrats' continued discontent. Fully 66%, including a majority of those who voted for both Brown and Clinton, said they wish some other candidate would enter the race. Peter?
Thank you, Lynn. That level of discontent to which Lynn refers is one measure of how voters feel about this year's candidates. Another is in the answers we were not able to get, because a large number of Americans didn't go to the polls at all. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
In Buffalo and Syracuse and Manhattan as well, they were making their choices today, heeding this tabloid admonition. But tens of thousands of New Yorkers chose not to choose at all today, frustrated with politics, underwhelmed by the candidates, uninvolved in the voting.
There's something missing. Something missing. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something missing.
What is clearly missing all over the country are the voters. In most of the primaries, turnout this year has been substantially lower than in 1988. In Mississippi by 50%, in Tennessee and Louisiana by 40%, in Connecticut and Georgia 25%. In fact, with the exception of New Hampshire, no primary has attracted more than 30% of its eligible voters. And on the sidewalks of New York today, you could hear some of the reasons.
Because I don't like any of the candidates.
The more they talk, the more they sound like idiots.
I don't know. I think it's more or less the people that are running.
All fluff and no substance, so I'm not voting in the primary.
I'm not going to vote because they're all crooks. Every one of them. The whole three of them. The whole four of them.
I mean, it's obvious that Clinton is going to be the candidate. Why bother?
Others were looking beyond the regular parties, and others were looking at candidates no longer in the race. But with all that looking, not a lot of voting. Presidential campaigns say a lot about the country, and one of the things this campaign is telling us is that what binds voters and non-voters together this year is disenchantment, discontent, disappointment, and in some cases, disgust. Jim Wooten, ABC News, New York.
And it's not just your average voter who feels that way. We have already been able to count 8 members of the Senate who will not run for re-election this fall. The latest to decide he's had enough is Senator Tim Wirth, the Democrat of Colorado, who will tell his constituents tomorrow. ABC's David Brinkley is with us for our primary night coverage. David, you practically need an adding machine to figure out who's not going to hang around in the House of Representatives.
Right. We don't even know how many. However the presidential election turns out, Peter, there absolutely will be changes in the Washington political establishment. Because the best estimate now is that in Congress, for example, 100 or more members of the House will leave. Some will retire out of anger that they can't get anything done, and they can't. Some are simply tired of the Washington pressures and endless demands and the need for constant politicking to hold on to their seats. Some will find a rubber check scandal is more than they care to deal with, and others will lose because of changes in the district boundaries. And some will be voted out because people are angry at the politicians and the political system, because they feel they keep electing new people and they see nothing change. If this estimate is accurate, and if there is a turnover of maybe 100 or more seats, that will mean about a fourth of the membership will change. And this could even bring changes for the better, because the new members will have to come from Washington, from their hometowns fresh, where they have heard the public complaints, and the members who stay in Washington and don't have to go home to campaign, that's most of them, will not be so well educated in the current political realities. If that doesn't bring some changes, what will, Peter?
Okay, David. David and I'll be here through the rest of the evening for analysis, including a special one-hour report at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. We hope you'll join us. In a moment, we'll have some of the international news. Russia and Ukraine being particularly belligerent over control of what was the Soviet Navy. On the American agenda tonight, global warming. The U.S. stands virtually alone. And finally, a real pain in the ear for a small Alabama town.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Infiniti.
Ladies and gentlemen, feast your eyes on the elegant new J30. A classic luxury sedan in an Infiniti kind of way. A driver's car with 2 airbags, soft leather appointments, and tasty wood. Hey pal, don't you even think about it. The new J30 from Infiniti.
Microsoft Excel can take any spreadsheet figure and easily turn it into a beautiful fact. All you do is point and click. Microsoft Excel, the spreadsheet for Windows. We'd like to point out that for 10 million people, Microsoft Windows is an easier way to use their PCs. We'd now like to point out how easy it is to see for yourself. Just call 1-800-882-2000.
Overseas today in the former Soviet Union, an alarming exchange between the two most powerful members of the new Commonwealth of Independent States. Russia and Ukraine have been unable to agree on who controls the old Soviet Navy's Black Sea Fleet. The two are sounding quite belligerent. Here's ABC's John Donovan.
This is the prize, the Black Sea Fleet. Today, the argument over who controls it had both sides for the first time using the language of war. On Ukrainian television tonight, a ranking member of that country's parliament said, quote, Russia's President Yeltsin, in essence, is calling us to a state of war. While here in Moscow, a member of Russia's Congress of Deputies said, you cannot start a world war over this, but it is worth using force. As of today, Russia and Ukraine each claims exclusive ownership of these warships and final say on whether the fleet will be divided between the two countries. A delegation from Ukraine's parliament went to the Black Sea to tell the ranking Russian admiral that Ukraine now has jurisdiction over his warships. The admiral reportedly told them he takes his orders from Moscow. At the same time, in Moscow itself, Russian legislators were being shown a decree, later signed by President Yeltsin, claiming the fleet for Russia.
How can two countries both raise their flags over one fleet? I think there will be only one flag. Who's? Russian.
That is not what they say in Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, where a senior officer says the trouble is Russia's inability to accept that Ukraine now makes its own laws. Most people still consider a shooting war between Russia and Ukraine unimaginable. What is imaginable to many is this dispute bringing to an end the brief experiment in cooperation called the Commonwealth of Independent States. John Donovan, ABC News, Moscow.
There was a concrete expression today of how upset the Bush administration is with what's happening in Peru. Over the weekend, the Peruvian president, Alberto Fujimori, virtually dismantled the country's democratically elected government. Today, the U.S. cut off more than $300 million in aid, including money to fight the drug war. ABC's Gary Shepard is in the Peruvian capital, Lima.
Hundreds of soldiers, as well as tanks and armored personnel carriers, are still deployed throughout Peru's capital, guarding the National Congress and other government buildings. Only 48 hours has passed since President Fujimori suspended the Constitution and dissolved Congress. A private public opinion poll taken last night indicates more than 70% of the voters here support Fujimori's actions. In declaring the emergency, he claimed that a corrupt Congress and judicial system had blocked his efforts to wipe out the drug trade and the Shining Path guerrilla movement. Many people are frightened by the increasing number of attacks by terrorists closer and closer to the capital. Late yesterday, opposition members of Congress attempted to meet at the Peruvian Lawyers Guild to force Fujimori out, but they were stopped by the National Police and Army troops, which fired shots into the air to disperse them. Last night, the opposition tried again, but gave up after soldiers fired tear gas. Authorities also raided the headquarters of APRA, the political party of former President Alan Garcia, and confiscated weapons and ammunition. Garcia is said to be in hiding in the Venezuelan embassy. President Fujimori has promised a new constitution, a new Congress, and new elections. But so far, he has not set a date. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Lima, Peru.
Also from overseas, the full results are now in for the Italian elections. The four-party coalition of Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti has won, but barely. Their majority in Parliament is down from 40 seats to 15. Alessandro Mussolini, on whom we did a report the other night, the granddaughter of the World War II dictator, won a seat as a neo-fascist. She called it a victory for the Mussolini family and said there is a swing to the right all across Europe, which in large measure there is. In our next segment, rethinking the worth of the Patriot missile.
I just can't stand this anymore. How am I supposed to fall asleep with this pain? I could take one of those nighttime pain relievers with a sleep ingredient. But all I really need is Advil to help stop the pain that's keeping me up. Just Advil. That's all I want. Without the extra sleep ingredient, I don't want. Advil is so effective, it relieves the pain, so I can get to sleep.
Discover the relief of Advil at bedtime. Advil, advanced medicine for pain.
To fight the effects of corrosion, the body of the Buick Regal has been built with two-side galvanized steel that goes beyond what most car makers use. Beyond Honda, beyond Toyota. In fact, all Buicks are warranted against outer body rust-through for 6 years or 100,000 miles. And that's a promise you don't have to take with a grain of salt.
That was perfect.
Back in 5, Stephanie?
When you're trying to eat right, days like this are a disaster. Is this it?
Stephanie Powers talks about Kellogg's Nutri-Grain.
The only time I really control what I eat is at breakfast, and the whole grain in Kellogg's Nutri-Grain gives me a natural start.
No sugar added, no preservatives, nothing fake.
No matter what I eat later, at breakfast I call the shots.
Naturally good. Nutri-Grain, the natural place to start.
The 1992 Pulitzer Prizes were announced today. Among the winners, a series of photographs from the Moscow Bureau of the Associated Press taken during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Another winner, Patrick Sloyan of New York Newsday, for his stories about Americans who were injured or killed by friendly fire in the Persian Gulf War. There was some unfinished business from the Gulf War as the subject of a hearing on Capitol Hill today. The Patriot missile, you recall, was hailed as a great success story during the war. But in the years since, a number of studies have questioned whether the Patriot was really as effective as the Pentagon said it was. Today, the Army retreated just a little on its claims. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
The Army has now lowered the Patriot's interception rate from 80 to 70% in Saudi Arabia and from 50 to 40% in Israel. Still, it says Patriot was a big success.
When the bottom line is drawn, it is far more successful than I could ever have hoped for.
But to the Army, success includes knocking the Scud slightly off course, even if its warhead remains intact. While that might protect a Saudi airfield, it could mean heavy damage in a city like Tel Aviv. At today's hearing, congressional investigators said the Army had not proven even its more modest claims.
In applying the Army's methodology to their data, the Army can claim one warhead kill.
But the investigators also said TV pictures used by critics to show Patriots missing their targets are equally unreliable. Throughout the war, the Army worked frantically to improve the Patriots' ability to catch the Scuds, which flew much faster than expected and often broke up in flight. The Army made adjustments to prevent the Patriot from chasing Scud fragments into the ground. The debate over how well the Patriots worked involves the future even more than the past. One of the biggest issues in the current defense budget is how much money should be spent on missile defense systems and how much protection they offer. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
The United Nations and Iraq have finally come to an agreement on destroying the Iraqi facility where the UN says Iraq was trying to produce nuclear weapons. Demolition at Al-Athir near Baghdad is expected to start tomorrow. If this next story had a headline, it would surely be, "Give me a break." Over the weekend, opponents of the Iranian government demonstrated, sometimes violently, at Iran's diplomatic missions in nearly a dozen countries. The Iranian government, which once took over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, is expressing outrage at what it calls Western indifference and lack of resolute action. On Wall Street today, fears of higher oil prices sent the Dow Jones Industrials down more than 61 points to close at 3213, and the trading was heavy. At least one person was killed and 16 more injured this morning when an underground pipeline blew up in East Texas. It was powerful enough, the explosion was, to measure between 3.5 and 4 on the Richter scale, which is the force of a moderate earthquake. People in towns more than 100 miles away reported feeling the blast. When we come back, the American agenda, the battle against global warming, waiting for the United States to get on board.
Forget about one-size-fits-all as a marketing strategy. Today you have to make each customer feel unique.
At AT&T, we have a range of calling plans that match the way small companies do business.
In 1978, I created my first racing wheelchair. Today, I make them for people all over the world. Probably 99% of my business is done long distance.
AT&T created Pro Watts for businesses that depend on long distance. The more you call, the higher the discount.
We're based in Oakland, but we do a lot of business with LA and Seattle.
AT&T Small Business Option Area Code Plan gives an automatic 10% discount on the 1 or 2 area codes they call most.
We sell toys from all over the world. We call Russia, Hungary, China. We're working now out of 3 locations just to fill the demand.
For small businesses that have grown to more than 1 location, our custom net plan combines their long distance bills for the maximum possible discount.
Rule number 1 is know the customer, and I would say rule number 2 is know the customer as well.
We can make a difference. AT&T. Call us.
Ordinary pickles are cooked and limp. Not Clausen. They're packed fresh and stored cold. So they're always crisp and delicious. Taste the difference. Cold, crisp, Clausen.
To pull her through a nasty lunch, Malox uses aluminum and magnesium. But his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Calcium-rich Tums.
Stay within the lines. The lines are our friends. Stay within them. Stay within the lines. The lines are our friends.
Introducing the world's first V6 crayon.
Are you listening?
The Isuzu Rodeo. Built to go way outside the lines.
We have put America's reputation on the American agenda tonight. You're going to be hearing a great deal over the next couple of months about the International Earth Summit, which will be held in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro. Nothing is going to prove more contentious than the whole question of global warming. Contentious because the Bush administration is out of step with the rest of the industrialized world. Our agenda reporter tonight is Ned Potter.
If the world is to head off the risk of global warming, with its danger of massive crop failure, of rising sea levels, of spreading starvation in the poorest countries, then America, the largest producer of the gases that cause global warming, is in the spotlight.
That unwillingness on the part of the United States to give what I had come to expect from the United States, which is leadership, is the major problem at this moment.
Sridhar Ramphal and many others fear a political disaster at this June's Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Many of America's closest allies, like the Europeans and Japanese, have already promised to sign a treaty there, stabilizing their output of carbon dioxide, the worst of the global warming gases. The U.S. alone objects to such a commitment. With 8 weeks before Rio, President Bush still has not said he will even attend.
My concern is twofold. One, to do what's right for the environment, and two, be sure that we don't throw a lot of Americans out of work.
That comment was a bombshell both at home and abroad. It was a setback to some of the administration's own aides who were trying to persuade the White House that global warming protection need not be economically painful. But when the president equated a treaty with loss of jobs, the battle was on. In several studies, environmental groups have taken the government's own energy proposals and used them to show that carbon dioxide can be cut at a profit. They say more efficient lights, motors, and insulation mean saving energy and money, and therefore making industry more efficient.
The president has it exactly backwards when he says that stabilizing CO2 has to hurt the competitiveness of our economy. Our analysis shows actually it would help.
Meanwhile, overseas, the Europeans warn of a nasty showdown. They say Rio will be a failure if the U.S. insists on a watered-down agreement. The European Community's Environment Commissioner is Carlo Ripa de Mena.
If a platform is weak, defensive, unwilling, the whole conference will be, I repeat, risking a major fiasco.
The Europeans insist they will not sign a weakened treaty. But at the White House, American officials say they do not want to be roped into needlessly costly promises. They ask if the Europeans' commitments are anything more than rhetoric.
We want them to be specific about what they're going to do in terms of action programs, legislation, and definitive steps that they're going to take to improve the environment. We don't want them just to say we'll agree to a number and then forget about it for the next 10 years.
Some governments, though, would argue they've made very specific plans. Germany, for instance, will have taxes on all industries that release carbon dioxide, higher efficiency rules for cars, power plants, and insulation. Holland has gone into greater detail, specifying the savings it expects from each sector of its economy. Using these plans, each country says it can start reducing carbon dioxide by the end of the decade. White House officials say they will soon offer a proposal that controls a whole range of greenhouse gases. They also say the president has hardly ruled out attending the Rio conference. But the key question is whether a treaty can be worked out that is acceptable both to the U.S. and its allies. Unless somebody compromises, they say, there may be very little at Rio worth signing. Ned Potter, ABC News for the American Agenda.
We'll have more news in just a moment.
On November 11th, 1940, a legend was born in Toledo, Ohio. Jeep. Jeep earned its stripes before most of us were out of knickers. Tough, unstoppable, go anywhere, get the job done.
But all the odds, a lot of people don't know that Jeep is part of Chrysler. So now it's our job to keep the legend alive. And this is where we'll do it.
Our new billion-dollar assembly plant in Detroit, Michigan.
Before the first Jeep came down the line, our workers had the most intensive quality training in the history of Chrysler. And this is a new Jeep Grand Cherokee, a lot more room inside, and the only sport utility with four-wheel analog brakes and a driver's airbag standard. Every inch a Jeep. To some people, Jeep is for climbing to the top of the world or just going out on the town. To us, Jeep is what all four-wheel drives are measured against. Always will be. Hey, in this business, you lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Red Lobster may have gone too far this time. A full pound of tempting shrimp overflowing your plate. Red Lobster's never offered you, whoops, so much on one plate. 10 grilled shrimp, 15 butterfly, 11 scampi. A full pound of our biggest and best shrimp for a limited time. So much shrimp with all the extras, including a doggy bag.
Red Lobster for the seafood lover in you.
It's make it or break it for Brown and Clinton. The New York primary has gotten rough. The most important battle of the campaign. Jennings, Brinkley, an ABC News special tonight.
Finally from us this evening, Hueytown, Alabama. It's a small town near Birmingham, but far enough out in the country that people who live there are accustomed to peace and quiet, or they were until a few months ago. ABC's Charlie Murphy's been to Hueytown to hear what you will now hear, and it is not a problem with your television set.
Things are humming in Hueytown, Alabama, literally. Since a strange hum started here, these neighborhoods sound like the Twilight Zone. The Bradburys.
That's what you're here. That's what we hear. All day long. All day long, all night long. And that, plus, the dog doesn't ordinarily bark.
The Hickses.
It's just a continuous humming or roaring.
A constant hum.
Yeah.
Just a constant hum.
It keeps her awake. Joe Bradford is losing sleep, too.
I've even called the police in the middle of the night, say, hey, get out here and do something, man. That thing's, getting the best of me. And it really is.
Hundreds are calling the police chief and mayor.
They certainly are. They're calling us saying, Mayor, am I going to have to go to a motel to get a good night's rest?
But what do people think is causing it?
Well, it could be anything from a government plot to to those blasted fans at the mines.
The fans draw deadly methane gas from the coal mines west of town. This one at a Jim Walters mine was installed last December, just when complaints started. It's a humdinger, but is it the Hummer?
The hum only comes every now and then, and we only have complaints every now and then. Do you think it's this fan or other fan? I don't think so.
Most people think it's that fan. I'm standing 6 miles away. Listen. Now listen to the fan up close. What do you think?
A big coal mine here pays out $40 million in wages and benefits yearly. If the fan is the culprit, the mine would have to be closed while it's modified. People are reluctant to challenge the coal company, but
we need to get something done about it. We need some relief.
They like life here to be a little humdrum. They'd like it more with a little less hum. Charles Murphy, ABC News, Hueytown, Alabama.
That's our report on World News Tonight. David Brinkley and I will be here throughout the evening with results and analysis of today's presidential primary elections, including a full hour at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I hope you'll join us. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a nice evening.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Just a happy boy as you are.
Tuesday, a new family pet?
The dog ate my slippers. Look what he's using as his chew toy.
Well, I hope he bought you dinner first.
Roseanne. Then, should a daughter hire her mother?
I took the heat for you, Mother. I thought I was hired for my refreshingly honest big mouth.
Room for Two with Linda Lavin follows Roseanne, Tuesday.
Amazing Blue Star ointment stops itching fast. Jock itch, ringworm, psoriasis, athlete's foot, and removes corns and calluses. Blue Star ointment, the one that's guaranteed. Ask for it.
Jack and Mary are finally getting around to their first barbecue.
Honey, it's cold.
Just a second, dear.
But honey, it's cold.
Too bad they don't know about all the new burger and chicken sandwiches at Perkins. Each one a tremendous feast. So, come on in.
Maybe you should add more lighter fluid?
Besides, it's nice and warm inside.
We're studying Robert's delicious tasting orange juice. If you will divert your eyes upwards, you can see the Robert's Juice Cow sunning.